What makes you lose your calm? Have you ever asked yourself, why is it that we adults, educated and informed, so easily lose our calm? Just a single unfriendly look, an offhand remark, a reckless car cutting us off on the road, or even a tiny error notification on the phone can be enough to make our heart race, our forehead heat up, our throat tighten with anger, anxiety, fear, or shame. We tell ourselves, this isn't worth getting angry about, yet deep inside, the mind keeps burning. The strange thing is, we do not want to lose our calm, and yet we seem unable to control it. Like someone sitting in a car that's already speeding forward, knowing the road but with the steering wheel not in our hands. We are living in an age where everything feels urgent, collision-prone, reactive. We read too much, work too fast, absorb too much information, noise and expectation from the outside world. And then we imagine what we need is more knowledge, more skills, more strategies to control life. But that is not it. What we truly need is to learn to control ourselves, not by gritting our teeth or suppressing emotion, but by cultivating an interior strong enough that, when upheaval strikes, we do not react like a storm, we act like the ground. I did not find that in skill-building books or in hollow cheerleading about positivity. I found it in a philosophy more than 2,000 years old, born of people who lived through war, exile, loss and pain, yet could write with a calm and clarity that are astonishing. That philosophy is called Stoicism. It is not as cold as the name might make us think. On the contrary, it is a courageous way of living, daring to look straight at the worst that can happen, accepting reality exactly as it is, and choosing to respond not with impulsive emotion, but with reason that has been forged. The 15 lessons ahead are not mere theoretical advice. They are survival skills, distilled from souls that passed through suffering, yet chose to stand firm. If you have ever found yourself directionless, out of control, or out of patience with life, then this is the map to lead you back to yourself. Not to become a perfect person, but to become a calm person in a world that never stops surging. Lesson 1. Disconnect when overloaded. There are days when your mind feels like a battlefield. Work piling up, unanswered messages, an inbox overflowing. A friend is upset because you haven't replied. Outside, traffic jams. Inside, chaos. Everything seems to scream at you at once. Fix it now, respond right away. But you know it well. The more you push to move faster, the more confused your mind becomes. The more you try to think, the more panicked you feel. And then at some point, you realize you've completely lost control. The world outside hasn't collapsed yet, but you already have. Stoic philosophy calls this a sign of a mind not properly guarded. Epictetus, a Stoic philosopher who once lived as a slave, once said, "It is not things outside of us that disturb us, but the way we let ourselves be carried away by them." You don't need to process more when you are overloaded. What you need is to pull the plug. Like a machine that is overheating, the wise choice is not to keep it running but to stop, so it doesn't explode. Disconnecting does not mean escaping. It is an active strategy to protect your ability to analyze, to choose, and to think clearly. If you expose yourself constantly to noise, to feedback, to pressure, then you will react instead of reflect. You will act on impulse rather than reason, and that is when you begin making decisions you will later regret. Those who practice Stoicism understand this well. Marcus Aurelius, the busiest emperor of the Roman Empire, whenever he felt himself wavering under pressure, did not try to do more. He sought a pause, a quiet retreat, and wrote a few lines in his small journal. What is true freedom? The ability to stop, to consider, and to act without being controlled by external circumstances. You don't need to be an emperor to practice this. You only need one principle. When you feel yourself slipping into chaos, stop immediately. Do not wait until things spiral out of control. Do not wait until anger erupts. Do not wait until the mind collapses before you search for meditation, for books, for solutions. Just a few minutes will do. Take off your headphones, put your phone down, breathe deeply, and tell yourself, I will not react right now. That is not a weakness. That is you choosing a true strength, the strength of clarity. You don't need to control the whole world. You only need to not let the world control your inner self. And sometimes, the wisest thing you can do in a chaotic day is to fall silent for a while and disconnect. Lesson 2. Don't react immediately. You are standing in line to buy coffee. Someone cuts in front of you. You stay silent. That person turns back, voice full of annoyance. What are you standing around for? If you want to buy, hurry up. Part of you instantly wants to snap back with a sharp, cutting remark. Another part wants to raise your voice and argue for fairness. And yet another part just wants to avoid it, stay quiet, endure, and then simmer with frustration for the rest of the day. But among all these possible reactions, there is one precious ability we often forget: the ability to observe before reacting. We usually react immediately because we believe we must handle that emotion as quickly as possible. If we don't react, we will be seen as weak. If we stay silent, others will keep taking advantage. But the truth is, the very first moment after being provoked is not meant for reacting, it is meant for observing. Stoic philosophy teaches this. Reaction is instinct. Observation is a choice. Epictetus once said something I always remember. When someone does something that angers you, do not act in haste. Ask yourself, what purpose are they acting for? And why does it hurt you so much? That question not only helps you understand the other person, it helps you understand yourself. Maybe they acted carelessly. Maybe they are also under stress. Maybe you were already tired from something else. And maybe, if you react too quickly, things will get worse, and you will bear long-lasting consequences just for a few seconds of lost control. Marcus Aurelius, in the midst of council meetings, wars, and rebellions, always reminded himself in his private notes, "Observe the mind as one standing outside watching a river. Do not jump in while the waters are still raging." In today's world, where we are constantly provoked by messages, notifications, words, debates, and endless drama, the skill of observing emotions before reacting is a form of inner mastery. Not everyone can do it, but whoever trains in it will always remain calmer than the rest. Next time, when someone annoys you, says something harsh, or pushes you into that urge to react immediately, pause for 3 seconds and ask yourself, will this reaction make things better, or will it only cost me my peace? And if you need to respond, do it only after your mind has returned to clarity. Because people do not defeat you with words. They defeat you when they make you lose yourself in just a few seconds of lost control. And if you choose to observe before reacting, you have already won, even if you say nothing at all. Lesson 3. Slow breathing. Have you ever noticed? Whenever you are anxious, angry, or panicked, your breathing always changes before your thoughts do. It becomes short, rapid, rising up into your chest. You feel tightness in your chest. Your heart races, your head grows dizzy. Not because the situation is too frightening, but because your body has assumed you are in danger. And this is what Stoic philosophy recognized more than 2,000 years ago. To master the mind, begin with the breath. The Stoic philosophers had no heart rate monitors, no modern neurological data, but they understood very clearly the connection between emotions and breathing. When emotions arise, do not try to reason with yourself immediately. At that moment, reason cannot yet function effectively. The first thing to do is to slow your breathing. Slow it until you regain inner space. Seneca, one of Stoicism's most learned thinkers, once wrote, "When anger rises, do not speak at once. Step back. Breathe in as though cleansing your mind with the air, and only afterward, if necessary, then speak." He was not speaking of meditation, not of mysticism. He was speaking of an action very specific, very physical, very biological. Inhale, exhale slowly. Today, science calls this the activation of the parasympathetic nervous system, the mechanism that allows the body to enter recovery and safety. When you breathe deeply, the body receives the signal, the danger has passed. It shifts from fight mode to calm mode. Just 1 minute of slow breathing and your thinking changes. 2 minutes and your words will be different. 3 minutes and you may make an entirely different decision. I once witnessed a businessman about to enter a meeting to dissolve his company, sitting alone in the waiting room. He did not make calls, did not read reports, did not brace himself with pep talks. He simply closed his eyes and breathed. Slowly, patiently, without rush. When he stepped into the room, he still carried sadness, but his eyes were no longer frantic. He spoke calmly, clearly, and he left the meeting as a man who had done what needed to be done without carrying regret. When I asked him what he did in those 10 minutes, he only smiled. I just breathed. Breathed to remind myself, I am still here. I have not been swallowed whole. If on a turbulent day you remember only one thing from Stoicism, remember this: before doing anything, breathe first. Breathe as if washing the storm out of your chest. Breathe as though each inhale is a step back from the cliff's edge. Breathe to reclaim mastery instead of handing it over to panic. You cannot think clearly while unconsciously holding your breath. So, inhale, exhale, slowly, and then everything will gradually become clear. Lesson 4. Realize the worst-case scenario. Have you ever stayed awake all night just because of an unanswered email? Or spent an entire morning restless simply because a message came back with just "okay" without any emoji? Or walked into a meeting with your mind spinning endlessly? What if the boss asks exactly what I'm unprepared for? What if I say something wrong? What if they judge me poorly? Nameless fears, shapeless yet powerful. They weigh on your chest like stone, spin your head in circles, and keep your mind from focusing on the present. But strangely, if someone were to ask you, "What's the worst that could happen?" you usually wouldn't be able to answer. And that is the core of anxiety. It exists because you've never dared to look it in the eye. Stoic philosophy teaches this. Anxiety is a monster that grows in the dark, and the only way to make it vanish is to turn on the light. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "We suffer not from reality, but from our imagination of it." Ask yourself, if that truly happens, will I endure it? This is not pessimism. It is a highly practical mental exercise. Define the worst-case scenario and write it down. Suppose you fear, "I will fail in this presentation." Make it concrete. Worst-case scenario? You stumble over your words, the audience stays silent. You feel embarrassed. Where does that lead? You may be judged not so well. You may miss an opportunity. Will you survive? Yes. You'll still have your job. You'll still have other chances. Any way to reduce the risk? Rehearse more. Write a script. Ask friends for feedback. And what happens then? The vague monster in your mind begins to shrink. Seneca, a statesman who faced death, exile, and loss, once said, "We often suffer from things that will never come to pass. But if we train the mind to accept the worst, then nothing can truly defeat us." This was not empty philosophy. He was exiled from Rome. His property was confiscated. His friends were executed. Yet he still wrote with calmness, as though nothing external could topple his inner self, because he had already lived through the worst in his own systematic imagination. In reality, the most anxious people are not the weakest ones. They are those with imaginations too strong, yet with no system to control them. Stoic philosophy gives you that system, not to extinguish imagination, but to make it serve your calm. So next time, when anxiety floods in, clouding your ability to think, do not avoid it. Write it down. Realize the worst-case scenario, and you will see. The fear is never as big as you thought. What is truly frightening is that you let it live too long in your mind, without ever once calling it by its true name. Lesson 5. Negative visualization. No one wants to think about losing a loved one. No one likes to picture being fired, rejected, betrayed, or humiliated in front of others. Modern culture teaches us to avoid negative thoughts, to always look on the bright side, to use the law of attraction to pull luck toward us, and to keep our energy forever high. Always high vibe. Always think positive. But Stoic philosophy says the opposite. Imagine the worst that could happen before it actually does. It may sound strange, but this is one of the oldest mental exercises practiced daily by the great Stoics. Its Latin name is premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils. Seneca once wrote, "A man who has pictured poverty will not tremble when it comes. A man who has thought of death will not panic when it draws near." What do you think would happen if every morning you spent just a few minutes imagining a loved one could leave you at any moment? Your current job could vanish with a single email. Your body, healthy today, could fall ill tomorrow. Small inconveniences, losing a phone, being stuck in traffic, having a flight cancelled, can arrive without warning. Would this make you pessimistic? Number. It would make you more grateful, more present, better prepared, and more deeply accepting of reality. When you visualize misfortune, you will no longer be shocked if it happens. You won't scream, "Why me?" because you've already said those words in your mind, and you've rehearsed living through that situation. Nor will you become cold. On the contrary, you will cherish the people beside you today even more, because you know they won't be there forever. You will live more kindly, because you know every chance to love may be the last. Marcus Aurelius, Roman emperor and Stoic scholar, reminded himself each night, "I shall not remain forever, nor will my loved ones, and so I will live today as if it were the last day I could live with them." I once practiced this exercise while waiting for the results of a medical test. Instead of reassuring myself with, "It'll be fine, it's probably nothing," I did the opposite. I imagined the results were bad, that I would have to change my lifestyle completely, that my health, the thing I had always taken for granted, might be taken away. And strangely, when the results did come back worse than I had hoped, I did not panic. I did not despair, because I had already lived with that fear. I had walked through it in my mind, enough times that when it truly arrived, I could meet it as someone familiar. Imagining the worst does not make you pessimistic. It makes you less hurt, less shocked, and less unprepared when life surprises you. It makes you grateful for the ordinary, the very things we usually take for granted until they disappear. So each morning, before being swept away by the rush of the day, spend just 1 minute to imagine what you might lose today. And then you will live the rest of that day more fully, more clearly, and with far more love. Lesson 6. Focus on the present. You are sitting still, but your mind is not. It may be drifting back to a conversation from yesterday where you wish you had said something different. Or it may be racing into the future, worrying about this afternoon's meeting, the weekend deadline, or a scenario that may never come. Your body is here, but you are not. We lose our calm not because of the present, but because the past leaves us restless and the future fills us with fear. And the irony is neither of those can you touch. You cannot fix the past. You cannot control the future. The only thing you truly have is this moment. Stoic philosophy constantly reminds us of what seems almost too simple. The present is the only thing you can live on, and the only place where you can change anything. Marcus Aurelius, who carried the weight of an empire on his shoulders amidst wars, rebellions, and loss, still wrote in his meditations these plain words: "Do not let your mind wander to the past or the future. Life is a single instant, this one. Live it as if it were the last gift you were given. And when you truly return to the present, you realize a deep breath is a miracle. Seeing your loved ones is a privilege. A sip of water, a song, and a rainfall are all things happening right now. Not in your head, but here, in this very moment." I once sat on a bus on the way to offer condolences for a friend who had died of a stroke. He was only 34. Just days before, we had chatted cheerfully. Just hours before, he was still in our group chat. All along the ride, I kept asking myself, why do we live as if we always have more time? Why do we waste today on things that may never come tomorrow? I looked out the window. Sunlight warmed the skin of my hand. The driver breathed steadily. A child in front yawned, leaning on her mother's shoulder. And for the first time in weeks, I felt my heart grow still. I wasn't thinking anymore. I was simply present. And in that moment, I felt a strange peace, as if that was the only place I needed to be and the only thing I needed to do. Stoic philosophy does not teach you to abandon the future, but it does teach you this: a good future is built only from moments fully lived in the present. So next time when you feel your mind begin to scatter, stop, take a deep breath, look around, touch what is here, because this is the only place you are truly alive. Lesson 7. Stop judging. Early in the morning, you wake up and see heavy rain. You sigh, rain again. A bad day has begun. You go to a cafe, and the server brings you the wrong drink. You mutter, "Of course, bad luck today." At the office, a colleague doesn't greet you as usual. You think, they must have a problem with me. Nothing truly terrible has happened, but you feel drained. You feel pressured. You feel unsettled, though you can't explain why. The truth is, you are not tired because of circumstances. You are tired because of the labels you place on every little thing that happens. Stoic philosophy teaches an incredibly important lesson, though few pay attention to it. Nothing is good or bad on its own. Everything is neutral until you judge it. Epictetus once wrote, "Others may act irrationally, but only if you believe it to be an insult, will you be harmed." What he meant was, it is not external triggers that make you lose your calm. It is the way you interpret them. When it rains, it is simply the weather. When someone frowns, it may be their own issue, not related to you. When you make a mistake, it may just be an error, not proof that you are worthless. But we rarely stop to observe. We judge instantly. And from there, emotions cascade like falling dominoes. I once heard a Zen master share a story about a student new to meditation. During practice, someone behind him coughed repeatedly. He grew irritated. Why can't he be more considerate? I can't focus at all. The next day, that person didn't come. But then there was the sound of cars outside, then the creak of a door, then the hum of a fan, and the student realized it wasn't the sounds that disturbed him. It was his own refusal to accept them. In daily life, you cannot control every situation, but you can always control the gap between an event and your judgment of it. All it takes is one question. Am I labeling this too quickly? That question opens a space for you to step back. No need to fake positivity. No need to deny feelings. Just pause before stamping bad on everything that displeases you. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "See things as they are without coloring, without additions. An event happens, period. Everything after that is written by the mind. You can learn to live lighter, not by making life easier, but by ceasing to turn everything into a tragedy. Start small. Someone arrives late. Maybe they were caught in traffic. Spill a drink, wipe it up. No need to scold yourself all day. It rains? It is simply water falling from clouds, not a prophecy of a bad day. Stop judging. Give your mind a few seconds to see things as they truly are, not as you fear they might become. And when you do this, not only will you lose less calm, you will also suffer less. Lesson 8. Keep the ego to a minimum. You walk into a meeting and present an idea you've spent weeks preparing. Someone speaks up. I find this approach rather naive, unrealistic. You freeze. Your face burns. Your pride feels trampled on. You feel insulted, judged, and diminished in front of others. Hours later, you're still upset. Days later, you still remember the words like a knife. And by then, you're no longer angry at the other person. You're angry at yourself for not striking back better. Why can a single comment control your emotions for so long? The simple answer is, because your ego is too large. Stoic philosophy faces this truth directly. The ego is what makes you most vulnerable. The ego makes you easily offended. The ego drives you to compare. The ego makes you interpret everything as, they're against me. And that ego often isn't even your true self, but an image you struggle to preserve, polish, and protect, even though it brings you no peace. Epictetus once said, if someone calls you a donkey, smile. If you are not, the words mean nothing. If you are, then you've just been reminded to change. It sounds humorous, but within it lies a powerful inner weapon, humility. The less someone clings to an image of themselves, the harder it is for others to wound them. Conversely, those who live by ego are always on guard, easily provoked, quick to react, as if the whole world were conspiring to make them lose face. I once worked with a remarkable manager. He was highly competent, yet never tried to appear superior. In one meeting, when publicly criticized for a poor decision, he simply nodded and said, "Yes, that decision wasn't good enough. Thank you for pointing it out. Next week, I'll present a new plan, and if you have input, I'm always open to it. No retaliation." No excuses, no blame. The room went silent, not because he was weak, but because his steadiness came not from defending his ego, but from not being dependent on it. Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful man in Rome, wrote in his journal each night, "Remember, you are only a human, one among many, neither above nor below. You are simply trying to live rightly." That is why he could remain calm in any circumstance, even when betrayed, criticized, or grieving his dearest ones. When you loosen your grip on ego, you will accept mistakes more easily, need less recognition from others, remain unmoved by criticism, and unseduced by praise. Calmness does not come from always being right. Calmness comes from not needing to prove you are special at every moment. So, when someone says something that stings, ask yourself, are they truly insulting me? Or am I simply feeling insulted because I want to preserve a certain image? Sometimes pride is not a reflex but a choice, and you always have the choice to remain composed instead of reacting. Lesson 9. Simplify everything. Have you ever fallen into this state? You wake up in the morning and don't know what to wear, though your closet is full. You open your phone, 17 new notifications, 4 group chats, 3 unread messages. You sit down at your desk, open 12 browser tabs, none of them truly important, yet each makes you feel incomplete if you don't check. Nothing is seriously wrong, but your mind feels like it's sliding on ice, unable to stay still, unable to focus, unable to rest. That is the price of a life with too many things. Stoic philosophy recognized this paradox long ago. The fewer things that control us, the more clearly we live. The simpler we live, the wider our mind becomes. Seneca once wrote, "It is not the man who has little who is poor, but the man who craves much." A steady life begins with letting go of what is unnecessary. Today, you may not live in a palace like Marcus Aurelius, but you are carrying more luggage than he ever did. A packed schedule, the weight of social media expectations, piles of belongings you haven't touched in a year, a to-do list as long as an unread book, and inside you, a clutter you try to organize each day but never feel settled. Stoicism does not ask you to throw away everything. It simply poses one question: is this truly necessary? Or are you keeping it out of fear, fear of missing out, fear of lacking, fear of not being recognized? I once spent an entire weekend not to clean my house, but to clean my mind. I wrote down everything I was doing, thinking about, or obsessed with. Then I crossed them out, one by one. Whatever was not essential, not urgent, not truly mine, I allowed it to disappear. And what was the result? I didn't achieve more. I simply felt less scattered and calmer. Strangely, when the mind was no longer pulled in every direction, I could finally hear my inner voice more clearly. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself each morning, "Today, I will carry nothing unnecessary. I will not demand what lies beyond my control. I will not let myself be divided by unimportant things." If you feel overwhelmed by life, it may not be because you are weak, but because you are carrying too many unnecessary things. The space in your mind is like a desk. The more clutter on it, the harder it is to find what you truly need. So begin today. Delete one app you never use. Turn off unneeded notifications. Cancel one meeting that doesn't help you grow. And most importantly, drop one thought that is clouding your peace. You don't need more to be calmer. You only need to live leaner, so your mind has room to breathe. Lesson 10. Do not be a slave to emotions. Sometimes it takes just one wrong word, one unfriendly look, one curt email without punctuation, and that's enough to make you flare up, react harshly, lose your temper, and then sit there asking yourself, why did I let something so small make me lose control? The answer often lies here. You didn't truly respond, you were swept away. Not by reason, but by emotions that had not been trained. Marcus Aurelius, even as Emperor of Rome, still wrote daily reminders to himself. My mind can remain tranquil if I do not let external events reach into its core. And that is the essence of this lesson. Emotions are waves. You cannot stop them from coming, but you can always choose how to ride them. I once watched a friend, brilliant but quick-tempered, fly into a rage over a feedback email from his boss. That same night, he shot back an emotional reply, and the next morning, he had to spend a week apologizing. The saddest part was not that he was wrong. It was that he hadn't given himself enough space to choose a better response. He didn't choose, he reacted. Stoic philosophy teaches us, emotions are real but not always right. You have the right to feel anger, hurt, anxiety, and envy, but you are not obliged to act on those feelings. Between stimulus and reaction, there is always a small gap. That is the space of choice. Those who train themselves in that space are free. Those who ignore it are slaves to circumstance. Epictetus once said, "The free person is not dragged along by every impulse, but stands still long enough to see what is truly worthy of response." So how do you choose a response instead of being carried away? Name the emotion. Instead of saying, I am angry, say anger is arising. Delay action. Don't text in anger. Don't speak if your heart is racing. Return to the body. Emotions are biological responses. Breathe, move, stand up. Write instead of blurting. Jot down what you want to say, then wait at least an hour before sending. When you practice this habit, you will find fewer arguments, lighter wounds, and most importantly, you begin living as the master of your inner life, no longer a puppet of your emotions. You cannot stop the world from provoking you, but you can always choose how to answer back. And that choice, whether silence or action, it is the mark of someone who is truly calm. Lesson 11. Face it, don't avoid it. You know exactly what you need to do. Make that phone call. Say you're sorry. Start the project you keep postponing. Get that unusual symptom checked. Meet the person you've been avoiding for too long. But you don't act. You push it to next week, next month, and you hope it will somehow disappear. But the truth is, worry does not disappear when you avoid it. It grows. And what unsettles you most is not what is actually happening, but the things you avoid that quietly gnaw at you every single day. Stoic philosophy confronts this head-on. Seneca once wrote, "Nothing is more frightening than what we refuse to face. The more we avoid, the more power we give it." One of the most common mistakes that robs people of calm, believing that avoidance will make life easier. You don't dare open the email because you fear rejection. Your mind creates the worst scenario. You don't dare speak your true feelings. You live under compressed tension. You don't dare admit you're wrong. You act out the role of "I'm fine" all day long. Each time you avoid, you don't feel lighter. You just add another layer of vague anxiety. I once knew a young man who delayed a medical checkup for 3 months simply because he was afraid of bad news. When he finally went, it turned out to be just a mild inflammation. But for those 3 months, he lost sleep, was tense, irritable, and unable to work. Not because of illness, but because of the imagined fear in his mind. Stoic philosophy teaches, action is the best medicine for anxiety. Worry is born in the mind, but it dissolves only when you step out and act. Epictetus once reminded, train yourself to meet difficulties with acceptance, not because they are easy, but because the more you avoid them, the weaker you become. So how do you begin to face things? Choose the smallest thing you are avoiding. You don't need to start with the big one. Ask yourself, if this really happens, can I endure it? Write down the worst-case scenario and see if it is truly as terrifying as you imagine. Decide through action, not only in thought. You don't need to confront every fear in one day. You only need to step toward one thing you've been avoiding today. Because the strange truth is, reality, once faced, is usually less frightening than imagination. And the very moment you dare to look at what scares you, it's the moment you begin to regain your calm. Lesson 12. Expand your perspective. One morning, you drive to work and someone rudely cuts you off. You honk. You curse under your breath. You stay angry for 10 minutes. In your mind, that person is a jerk. The world is against you, and the rest of the day feels ruined. But here's what you forgot. You know nothing about that person. You don't know if they're rushing their child to the hospital. You don't know if they just received bad news. Or maybe they simply made a mistake in that one moment. Stoic philosophy reminds us of one thing. Do not trust the version of the story your ego creates. Because the ego always places itself at the center, and from there, every inconvenience is immediately interpreted as, they are against me. Marcus Aurelius, the emperor who ruled an empire, still wrote in his private notes each day to remind himself of something seemingly obvious. You are but a tiny dot on a small rock, flying through an infinite universe. So, do not let small things wound your soul. Expanding your perspective is not about appearing profound. It is about freeing yourself from the suffocation of the ego. Because when you believe everything revolves around you, you will. You are easily hurt when someone fails to acknowledge you. Be easily angered when others don't behave as you expect. Be quick to overinterpret accidents, creating chains of needless anxiety. But when you step back a little, you realize everyone is fighting battles you cannot see. What you call terrible today is but a grain of sand in a lifetime. You don't need to control everything, you only need to control yourself. I still remember a time I fell into crisis after being misunderstood online. One of my writings was cut out of context, and I received a wave of criticism. At first, I was furious, then indignant, then sad. But after days of journaling and reflection, I suddenly realized the world is not sitting here to judge me. Everyone is carrying their own burden. If they misunderstood, perhaps it is because they are hurting somewhere too. That thought didn't make me noble. It simply returned my calm. Because I no longer placed myself at the center, I shrank so I could see more clearly. Stoicism offers a special exercise of imagination. Picture yourself rising higher and higher above your body, your city, your earth. From that height, you look down. You no longer see arguments, reactions, or petty worries. You see only small creatures, each trying to live in their own way. And you realize no one is aiming at you. They are just busy living their lives. When you expand your perspective, you will react less to small things, care less about fleeting emotions, and most importantly, stop thinking the world is organized to hurt you. You are not the center of the universe. You are just a very small part, but you can live beautifully if you know how to step back and see the bigger picture. Lesson 13. Self-discipline. Many people think calmness is a gift of birth, that some are born serene, while others never can be. But Stoic philosophy sees it differently. Calmness is not innate. Calmness is the result of disciplined actions repeated every day. You cannot keep a clear mind if your sleep is always irregular. You cannot control emotions if you eat recklessly, work chaotically, and scroll your phone until midnight. You cannot respond rationally and slowly if your inner world is in disorder, with no firm ground to stand on. Calmness begins with a life that is organized. Marcus Aurelius, in the busyness of an emperor, still kept to these practices, writing in his journal each day, rising at a fixed hour, spending time in reflection and self-examination, not because he was free of duties, but because he understood. Inner tranquility does not come from luck, it comes from outer order. Self-discipline is not self-punishment, nor turning into a machine. It is simply sleeping enough, eating moderately, turning off unnecessary notifications, refraining from careless words, practicing something consistently even if just 10 minutes a day, or simply keeping promises to yourself. I once knew a remarkably calm friend. He spoke little, but was present in every difficult moment. Even under pressure, he stayed clear and steady. I asked him his secret. He smiled and said, "Each morning I wake at 5:30, no alarm. I write one page in my journal, drink water, stretch lightly, and only then do I open my phone. I keep that habit like brushing my teeth." What surprised me was not the early hour, but the way he kept his commitment to himself. When you keep your own promises, you are not so easily swayed by the world outside, because inside you already have a foundation. Epictetus once taught his students with a simple image. To build a strong house, lay each brick. To build a strong soul, lay each habit. It need not be big, only consistent. Self-discipline does not make you rigid. It is what keeps you from collapsing when everything around you falls into chaos. It is the quiet preparation so that when storms come, you already have ground to stand on. You don't need to change your whole life in a single day. You only need to keep one small habit regularly as an anchor for your mind. From one habit comes two. From one quiet hour comes a peaceful day. And gradually, you no longer have to force yourself to be calm, because you have been living in stability all along. Calmness does not come from controlling everything. It comes from controlling yourself each day, little by little. Lesson 14. Empathy. You walk into a cafe. The server is curt. You send a kind email and receive a cold, clipped reply. You speak sincerely, and the other person reacts as if you were bothering them. What's your first reflex? Anger, assuming they're rude, telling yourself, how impolite. What did I do wrong? But Stoic philosophy doesn't let you stop there. It invites you to ask a deeper question. If you don't know what is happening in their inner world, why rush to judge? Marcus Aurelius, living amidst conflict, pressure, and betrayal, wrote each morning in his journal, "Today I shall meet people who are selfish, arrogant, and rude, but I will not be angry, for I know they act not out of malice, but out of ignorance of what is better. That is not a weakness. That is wisdom." Stoicism does not encourage weakness, but it teaches this: the strong do not need to retaliate. The calm do not need to win. The wise understand. Everyone is hurting somewhere. I once met a receptionist. Her face is always tense, eyes defensive. People avoided her. But one day when I stayed to chat, she shared. Her husband had just died in an accident. Her child was ill, and she had no close family in the city. I was stunned. What I had thought was attitude. It was really just armor, shielding her from exhaustion spilling over her mind. Epictetus once taught, "Do not judge another's actions unless you have walked a day in their shoes." And so, the Stoics train themselves to see beyond appearances, read deeper than surface reactions, refuse to let others' emotions knock them off balance. This doesn't mean you must endure all unreasonableness, but you can choose a different response, not striking back immediately when treated poorly, asking instead of concluding, could they be going through something? Keeping enough distance for safety without carrying resentment. You never know how terrible today might be for someone else. The person you find unpleasant may be in a crisis they cannot voice. The person who is rude to you may never have been taught kindness. So true, calm is not about never being provoked. It is about understanding enough not to let another's pain dictate your own reaction. You can choose empathy, not because they deserve it, but because your peace deserves it. Lesson 15. Write to clear your mind. Have you ever found yourself in this state? A long day ends. The lights are off. Your phone is set aside, but your mind refuses to switch off. You lie down, close your eyes, and thoughts start racing. Did I say something wrong today? Why did they look at me like that? What must I do tomorrow? Did I forget anything? Is everything really fine, or am I falling apart without noticing? You try to push the thoughts away, but the harder you try, the more tangled your mind becomes. The Stoics did not wait until their minds were in chaos to find relief. They wrote every day as a way to tidy up within. Marcus Aurelius, in times of war, plague, and profound loss, still set aside moments each day to write in his journal, not for publication, not for anyone else to read, but to have a dialogue with himself. He once wrote, "The mind must be trained each day, like a wild animal that must be tamed through observation and reflection." Meditations. Journaling is the simplest act of turning chaotic feelings into something with form. When you write, you are forced to name what you feel. You no longer sit in the fog of something feels wrong. You face it directly. I am angry. I am worried. I am ashamed. And in that very moment, you begin to separate yourself from the emotion. You are no longer angry. You are the observer of it. From there, you regain control. I once went through a period of disorientation. Too much work, pressure mounting, emotions unstable. I didn't know where to begin to calm down. A teacher simply told me, each night, write for 5 minutes. No need for beautiful words, only honesty. I did. At first, it was just messy rambling. But after a few days, I began to see a pattern. I worried most when things were unclear. I got angry because I expected too much of others. I was exhausted because I had slept too little. And once I saw it, I no longer blamed myself. I simply understood. And from there, I knew what needed to change. Stoicism does not require you to be a writer. It only asks you to be willing to face yourself. Each page is a mirror. Reflect on how your mind is today. And also a map, guiding you back to your center where you are clearest, calmest, and strongest. You don't need a fancy notebook, just a blank sheet of paper, a pen, and one small commitment. Each day, even just a few lines. I will listen to myself before I let the noisy world press in on my mind. Because writing is not for remembering. Writing is for untangling. Writing is for slowing down. Writing is for keeping the mind from breaking. In a world that never stops rushing, is staying calm the same as being indifferent? Stoics must be emotionless. If you're always calm and rational, are you still human? Staying calm in every situation, does that mean watching others suffer without reacting? These are natural questions and understandable doubts. Because if you only look at Stoicism from the outside, it's easy to think, calmness equals not caring. Clarity equals coldness. Self-control equals indifference. But look more closely, and you'll see. The Stoic is not indifferent. They simply refuse to let emotions dictate their choices. Marcus Aurelius is a vivid example. Though an emperor, he personally cared for his wife and children when they were ill. Even on campaign, he still wrote tender letters to his friends. Yet he did not let tragedy shatter him. He did not let anger cloud justice. He did not let grief become an excuse for cruelty. The Stoic does not avoid emotion, they simply do not let emotion control their actions. When angry, they do not rush to retaliate. When sad, they do not collapse into self-pity. When misunderstood, they do not scream to prove themselves. When facing injustice, they act from principle, not from hatred. I once thought that being overly rational would strip away humanity. But then I met an emergency doctor who told me, if I panic with every critical patient, I won't save anyone. I need to keep my head cool so my hands can act right. But after the shift, I still cry. I just learned not to let emotions intrude at the decisive moment. That is Stoicism. Not feeling nothing but knowing the right time to feel. Not being numb but having an inner anchor strong enough not to be swept away. Seneca once said, "It is not that we have no emotions. We simply are not slaves to them. We still love, grieve, still care. But we choose to act from virtue, not from impulse." So staying calm is not about avoiding emotions. It is about giving them their proper place, not overwhelming, not ignored. You can be both steady and compassionate, both self-controlled and empathetic. And it is precisely this combination that forms the highest strength. In an increasingly chaotic world, calmness is an act of defiance. Have you noticed? We are living in an age where staying calm has become rare. Everything demands your immediate reaction. Sensational news. Social media pushes emotions. Messages arriving, notifications flashing, expectations rising, standards unclear. No one teaches you to pause. Everything insists that you must react, prove yourself, win as quickly as possible. In such a world, calmness is no longer instinct. It is a choice. And that choice is not easy. But those who live by Stoic philosophy understand this. To master the world, you must first master yourself. Because you cannot control who mistreats you, but you can control your response. You cannot stop misfortune from happening, but you can choose how to walk through it. You cannot know what tomorrow will bring, but you can train yourself strong enough to receive it, whatever it is. The 15 lessons we've walked through are not formulas. They are stepping stones so you can build your own path back to the center of your inner self. There, you are not swayed by public opinion, not lost by criticism, not pulled by unrealistic expectations. There, you are clear, steady, and strong enough to live by your values. You don't need to become a philosopher. You don't need to read all of Meditations or Seneca's essays. You only need to start today. Pause 10 seconds before reacting. Write a few lines when your mind feels tangled. See wider when you are hurt. Keep one promise to yourself. And each morning, ask yourself, what is within my control and what is not? Because in the end, calmness is not a destination. It is a way of living, a choice practiced daily. And like all things of true value, it requires persistence. But in return, it gives you freedom. Freedom from impulsive reactions. Freedom from other people's moods. Freedom from unnecessary wounds. Freedom to live by reason, virtue, and love. If you are still looking for a place to begin, here is one final suggestion. Choose one principle from this Stoic journey, just one, and live by it for the next 7 days. You will discover calmness is not a luxury. It has always been within you, waiting for practice to awaken it. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Marcus Aurelius.